Doing well. How are you, Pete?
Very well, John. Thanks for coming on. Been talking about your article, Kiko Alonso. The intrigue grows with this guy. He's going to get his first game action tomorrow night, I believe. He's been out all training camp with that concussion, and now all of a sudden he has a nagging tendinitis in one of his knees. Chip Kelly kind of confusing the media here, backtracking, not knowing which knee he's having difficulty with. Is this something that Eagles fans should be worried about this season with Kiko Alonso?
A little bit, because Kiko himself spoke after practice and did confirm it is, the tendinitis is in the knee where he had the ACL surgery, which is kind of expected. I mean, anybody who's had that operation knows that there's going to be some collateral damage, so to speak. And the more interesting part is, Chip keeps trying to downplay it, and understandably so, because we're almost at the end of the preseason now, and Kiko's missed all 3 games so far, partially due to the concussion and now the setback with the knee, and that's the reason he has to play. And in Week 4, generally your starters, especially your premier starters, which Kiko Alonso is expected to be, you don't want him playing in that game, but he's got to get out there and he's got to at least have some live repetition. So he needs to be ready for Week 1, and I still think he's on line to be there, but all these question marks are have to make you pause and say, what's going on, and I think people are starting to do that.
He had such a great rookie campaign in Buffalo, over 100 tackles. Then he goes down with the ACL tear in his left knee, and then he gets the concussion, and then he has this tendinitis. I mean, are we just going down a path of, not if this guy's going to get injured, but when, in your opinion, especially with the way he plays the game, John?
Yeah, and that's the concussion aspect. You're a little bit concerned because of the way he plays the game. I mean, we always talk about the Eagles don't hit in training camp, so there's no tackling at practice. There hasn't been since Chip got here, but, Kiko goes 100 miles an hour at all times, and boom, all of a sudden he's down with a concussion. And the way the game is going, because of the concern over the safety issues, we talked about this in the offseason with Chris Borland retiring at age 24. If you're an inside linebacker in this league, eventually you're going to get a concussion. And certainly the way that Kiko plays makes him susceptible to that. So it's something to keep an eye on. And then the knee is always a concern, because it's just a situation where we've seen with Sam Bradford and consecutive ACL surgeries, and you hope that doesn't happen to another player, but it has to creep into your mind at least a little bit.
Wanted to get your thoughts on the game from Bradford last weekend. 10 for 10, 3 touchdowns. I mean, the pinpoint accuracy, something that Bradford has kind of been known for throughout his career. But is this something that we can really expect out of Bradford all season long if he does stay healthy? Really, that pinpoint, I mean, not going 10 for 10, but just the completion percentage is going to be up there, 65, 68% from Bradford staying healthy?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that accuracy aspect. I never saw it from Sam in St. Louis, and that's one of the things that Chip Kelly kept telling us and kept selling us on, was the fact that Sam was so much more accurate than Nick Foles, and that was one of the reasons they made the move. And we were told that, but we didn't see it until Green Bay. He was extraordinarily accurate against the Packers, and obviously 3 series of work, as you mentioned. 10 of 10, and I joked that it looked like Aaron Rodgers, changed jerseys as was playing for the Eagles. That's how good he was as far as the ball placement went. But I think that's new. I dating back, people talk about the arm talent and how elite he was, and obviously as a former number 1 overall pick, he certainly was. But I never saw this kind of accuracy in St. Louis. So to expect it can continue unabated, that's probably a little much, and to talk about 65, 70%, that's at the high level in today's NFL. But that's what the Eagles are shooting for. They've been telling us from day one, that his game is all about accuracy and quick decision-making, And we've only seen it for 4 series, but for those 4 series, it's been as advertised. So now he just has to continue to play that way over a full game. We'll see it week 1. But to me, there's a difference between doing it for a short period of time and then doing it for 85, 90 plays in a game, because that's what the Eagles do as far as up-tempo, and they want to run that many plays per game.
I'm glad you mentioned the quick decision-making from Bradford, because we saw that in the Green Bay game where he'd take 3, 4, 5 steps, set his feet, and then fire, and we really saw that on the Sproles touchdown. Is that another important aspect of his game that could really complement Chip Kelly's offense, is that quick decision-making, John?
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's what Chip wants. If you go back to how he ran things at Oregon, it was basically a one-read offense. It was make your decision and go. And that's what he's looking for, and that's what he wants. And that's what Nick Foles kind of struggled at. He would hesitate, kind of hold on to the football, and that would frustrate Chip. So basically, Chip wants a quarterback who will make that quick decision, get rid of the football, and go on to the next play. And that's what Sam has been able to do, again, in a very short sample size, very small sample size, but it's a positive development. There's no question about it, because, I'll be writing about something, on the website soon about, possibly people talking about RG3 being a fit for Chip Kelly. And everyone talks about mobility as the first thing he wants, and I'm not necessarily sure if that's true. He certainly wants it, but he wants other attributes as well. One of them is accuracy. One of them is quick decision-making. The fourth is probably culture, along with that mobility. Sam Bradford has 2 of them, and you'd love to get all 4, but that's easier said than done.
Let's go to 2 quarterbacks you really haven't shown much when you talk about decision-making and kind of accuracy, and that's Tim Tebow and Matt Barkley. The third-stringer battle, Barkley's going to start tomorrow. Tebow really did not look all that good on Saturday night against the Packers. What do you make, number one, of Barkley starting? Is that just kind of a showcase thing for Kelly, Tim Tebow's chances of making the team? And how about the possibility of neither one of these guys making the roster, John?
Yeah, it's a possibility. I mean, obviously there's 3 options. Either it's Barkley's spot, it's Tebow's spot, or the Eagles could go with 2 quarterbacks and just keep the 53 best players on the roster, because I think if they do that, neither makes the ball club, and we'll move on from there and possibly get a developmental type for the practice squad as the third stringer. But I think Matt Barkley's made the original plan a little more difficult because he hasn't played well since the opening preseason game against Indianapolis. I think the Eagles want to trade him, they want to showcase him, and they want somebody to bite. But the bottom line is that every time he goes out there, he makes that more difficult because he hasn't played at a very high level. And it's tough for third-string and fourth-string quarterbacks in the preseason, because you get very limited reps, even here when they talk about the tempo and practice and about how many reps they run compared to other teams. It's still obviously that not as much time as a guy like Bradford gets in practice, or a guy like Mark Sanchez even. So, and then the second part of it, you're playing with third and fourth string players. So instead of Jordan Matthews and Josh Huff and Nelson Aguilar and Brent Selleck, you're dealing with the Rasheed Baileys and the Kieran Pratts of the world, and that makes it very, very difficult to be consistent. And I think you've seen that from both Matt Barkley and Tim Tebow, and it's an issue.
What did you make of Tim Tebow failing twice on those 2-point conversion attempts in the first quarter on Saturday night, John?
Well, it hurts him because, I mean, if you're going to be a specialist and that's what you're supposed to do is help this team convert 2-point plays, and you're not able to do it, well, then what is the justification to keep Tim Tebow on this football team? Because obviously he's not a traditional quarterback in the mold you think of one who's, accurate throwing the football down the field, or even a Russell Wilson or a Colin Kaepernick type who can run the zone read. He's neither of those things. So he's got to be a specialist, and he's got to be successful on those plays. And the fact that he hasn't been, hurts his chances to be on this football team.
John McMullen, our Eagles insider, 973ESPN.com, with me right now on 97.3 ESPN FM. Kenyon Barner and the running back position. You mentioned guys being one of the best 53 players on the roster. I think Barner is. He's earned a spot with his play, obviously, but does he fit in with Murray, Matthews, and Sproles? Is there room for Kenyon Barner?
Well, that's one of the things we're talking about. And do you want to keep the best 53 players? And if you do, you're probably right. Barner deserves to be on this football team because of his special teams acumen, his ability to return the football. And, oh, by the way, he's not a bad running back either, although with the guys you mentioned, specifically Murray, Matthews, and Darren Sproles, he's not going to be needed in the backfield. So if you're going to justify keeping him on the roster, that means you have to take a spot from another position. Might mean keeping 2 quarterbacks instead of 3, or taking 8 offensive linemen instead of 9, or taking 1 less receiver, 1 less defensive lineman. So those are the decisions you have to make to get down to 53. And sometimes they're nice when you have a player like Barner, and certainly has proven he could play at the NFL level. And sometimes it's not as nice because at other positions like safety, where you don't have a lot of depth and you probably don't have enough NFL caliber people to build up that spot, you have to start looking at the waiver wire. But to me, I mean, at some point you got to tip your cap to a kid like Barner and say, you've made this football team back-to-back games with punt return touchdowns. Then he's got a 50-yard screenplay. I mean, what else does he have to do?
That could affect the offensive line where you kind of have some depth, but, I mean, they're all just names. They're all just journeymen at this point. Guys like John Moffitt, Julian Vandervelde, are those guys in danger of not making this team? And a guy like David Moak and maybe Dennis Kelly could maybe supplant them on the roster, John?
Yeah, it's definite. It's very fluid. It's going to come down to the Jets game on Thursday. It really is, because there isn't a lot of proven depth. The one guy you can point to is pretty, has locked down the spot is going to be Matt Tobin as far as being the swing tackle as the backup. And then everything else, as far as the reserves on the offensive line, is up for grabs. I think, David Moak played well until the Green Bay game, and then he took a pretty significant step back. And he doesn't have as much versatility as a guy like Vandervelde, but, Julian hasn't played well throughout the preseason. Chip kind of talked about how much he liked Dennis Kelly, but I'm not sure you need 2 backup swing tackles, and Kelly certainly isn't going to beat out Matt Tobin. So that makes his status a question mark. And Moffitt is a real interesting one because he's only played one position, that's right guard, because he hasn't played football in 2 years. They wanted him to get acclimated and get back in the groove. And generally when you're a backup, you have to have versatility on the offensive line and be able to play more than one position. So if they keep John Moffitt, it'll be because they think he could develop into the starter right guard down the line. Otherwise, they're going to have to release him.
One guy that hasn't really developed into a starter, and that's Marcus Smith. I mean, he was kind of a project when they first selected him in the first round, but, I mean, now he's injured. He's really complicated that process of evaluating him. Is he in jeopardy of being cut, John?
Yeah, I think he is. You can
Wow.
sense, very similar to Earl Wolff, you could sense Chip's frustration with him as far as not being able to stay on the field. This is, people kind of forget he missed a significant portion of the off-season work with a hamstring injury, and then he re-injured it against the Ravens in those dual practices. Only been able to play in one preseason game, so there isn't a lot to judge him on. The one thing that might save him, not the fact that he was a former first-round pick, because, I think Chip could use the fact that he could blame Howie Roseman for that choice and decide to move on if he wanted to.
I wouldn't put it past him.
Yeah, exactly. But remember, Travis Long tore his ACL. He was expected to be that third outside linebacker behind Connor Barwin and Brandon Graham. So he's gone. So they don't have a lot of depth there, and they're trying to sort of get Vinny Curry up to speed, move him from the defensive line to outside linebacker. He was working pretty hard with Connor Barwin, Jason Peters after practice the other day. But that's a difficult transition to make in his career, think about it, and then this late in training camp before week one. So I think the fact that they don't have a lot of depth might be the one thing that saves Marcus Smith.
John McMullen, our Eagles insider, 97.3 ESPN.com, 97.3 ESPN FM right now. You mentioned RG3 earlier on in the conversation. You have a piece upcoming for the website. Could this guy get cut? I mean, do you really see the Redskins outright releasing him with Kirk Cousins now being named the starter and the whole Instagram stuff from yesterday? Do you see a scenario where the Redskins just cut ties with him?
Well, they have to make a decision at some point because, the monetary stuff just doesn't work.
$16 million, right, next season?
Yeah, next season, if he's on the roster the first day of the league year, that $16 million is fully guaranteed even for injury. So they can't keep him on the roster. It's either basically Daniel Snyder's got to fire the coach or get rid of the quarterback. So he's got a decision to make, and if Jay Gruden wins this kind of power struggle, and he's got the GM, Scott McClugan, on his side. So it's a possibility. It's about $7 million in dead money for this season if they release him. Obviously, they'd love to trade him. Not sure if they can do that. But people forget how good he was in his rookie season. There's a ton of talent. And obviously, anytime you have a mobile quarterback, people automatically put two and two together and say, oh, Chip Kelly wants that guy. I think that's a little overdone because there are other attributes he wants, and we talked about them, the decision-making, the accuracy, and those kinds of things are not RG3's strength. And then the biggest part is Chip constantly talk about culture, and RG3 is obviously not a fit. Was not well liked in that is not well liked in that Washington locker room. That's been pretty clear for going on, basically 2 years now. So I'm not sure he's the fit others think he is. But that said, until Sam Bradford gets extended, the most important position on the field is still in flux here in Philadelphia, and it's hard to extend Sam Bradford because as well as he's played, there's still the injury concerns. There's still all of that. So, anytime you can add a player with talent, you do it. So if he's released, I'm not going to say it's an impossibility, but I think it's very unlikely that the Eagles would want to bring RG3 here.
How did we get to this point? I was asking this question earlier today, John, is how did we get to this point in RG3's career with Redskins when he comes in, he's the rookie of the year, then he gets injured, so he has to get that ACL repaired, and now the Instagram stuff, the social media nonsense too, this guy is in danger of getting cut. I mean, how did we get to this point? Is it mostly on RG3? Is it the coaching staff? Does it really start at the top with Daniel Snyder, in your opinion? How did we get to this point with RG3?
Well, it's all of the above. I mean, he has to look in the mirror at some point because it is. He does play a position that you almost have to be by nature. You have to be a leader, and he hasn't been a great leader there. There's a lot of people in that locker room who as we mentioned, are not behind him, who would rather have other people playing the position. Part of it's the head coach and the fact that he went into that job and assured the owner that he could work with RG3, but he doesn't want that type of quarterback. He wants a more traditional drop-back progression thrower. So part of it's Jay Gruden's fault. And then there's Daniel Snyder, who has always believed in RG3, has always been in his corner. And, he has basically ordered the head coach in the offseason to move forward with Griffin as the quarterback. And anytime you have a meddling owner, it's not a recipe for success. So basically it's dysfunction central in D.C., and everybody is a part of it, and everybody deserves part of the blame, including the player himself.
Last one for you, John McMullen, our Eagles insider, 97.3 ESPN FM. Deflategate. We're on a bit of a watch here. Are we in store for a Labor Day weekend news dump with the Tom Brady news? Is it really going to be all or nothing with the suspension, upholding it, or just absolving it completely? Where we stand with Deflategate, John?
It's the Labor Day news. It's coming Friday afternoon. I would almost guarantee it. And, it's almost like Dutch Berman. He kind of gave out hints he would make the decision yesterday or today, and then kind of realized, you know what, Monday's Labor Day. I'm going to do it on Friday. But he could always change. And to me, no matter what, it's not the end of it, because whoever loses appeals immediately. And then we go to the next stage, which is I think it's more likely that he upholds mention more than not. And then it becomes Tom Brady trying to get a stay in the appeals court to play week 1, and it gets pushed back as far as the suspension to 2016. I think that's the most likely scenario. But, Berman has made it pretty clear he's happy with the NFL's behavior in this case. One knuckleball that I've some legal people, I don't believe it, but the one way it could finally end is if there's a backdoor deal and Berman has worked out something with both sides and reduces the suspension. Technically, he doesn't have the power to do that, but as people have pointed out, you can only have an appeal if somebody files it. So if both sides agree, say he knocks it down to 2 games, and both sides agree not to appeal, then we can move forward and we can fix things that way, and both sides can save face. I think it's unlikely, but it's an interesting scenario.
All right, John McMullen, our Eagles insider, Eagles-Jets, preseason game number 4, the finale tomorrow night right here on 97.3 ESPN FM. Thank you, John.
Hey, thanks, Pete.